Monday night, they had been married 9 days. And so they'll be going to back to Ireland, and just a tremendous couple. Then also Brother Brian Baggett. Now he'll be with us in February, he and his wife. But he is the new military director of military missions for BIMI, and he was a pastor and had pastored near Fort Leonard Wood. Not Leonard Wood. Good night. There at Clarksville, Tennessee. Does anybody in the Army remember that? Good night. But anyway, he needs support now. He's on the field full time, and so I'd like to present that they're coming, but I want to go ahead and support them for $100 a month. So if I could get Brother Tom makes a notion, I'll let our new member, Brother Garner, second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And so we'll start that. Directors have to raise quite a bit more money than the missionaries do. One is because the cost of living here in America is so much. Secondly, all the plane trips they have to make to the different mission fields, helping the missionaries, and then traveling here in the States trying to make aware of our military mission. But great. Also, we want to support, Lou, tell it to me again. The camp? Dayspring. We go out there probably 3 or 4 times a year, and they need support out there for repairs and buildings and things like that. And we don't usually support this much, but our God has really blessed our missions, and I'd like to support them for $200 a month. So I'll take another motion that we do that. Brother Ronnie does that. Brother Bill Dozier seconds it. All in favor say aye. So praise the Lord. We are able to do that, and thank God for that. All right, let's look at the book of Malachi. We started this the last time that I was here with you on a Wednesday night, and we talked about, we know very little about the next to the last of the Old Testament prophets. That's Malachi. Who was the last Old Testament prophet? John the Baptist. A lot of people don't realize this, but grace did not actually start until the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And so most of the 4 Gospels are still under the law. And as a matter of fact, when you stop and think about it, it was the religious crowd that gave Christ the most headaches. And it was the greatly religious group, the Pharisees, that really gave him a hard time. But we know very little about Malachi, but he is ministering to what we refer to as the restored Jewish nation, in probably round figures about 400 years before Christ. Most Bible teachers believe that between the end of Malachi and the beginning of Matthew is approximately 400 years. A lot of Bible teachers call this God's quiet time. I don't think so. It's quiet to us because we don't have any written record of what was going on. But I'm going to tell you something. God has never, ever forsaken His people. And even though He didn't think it was worthy or needed for us to know what happened in all that time, and you can go to world history and find out the historical events that takes place, but God was still working with His people. I want to say something that I have come to realize in the last several years. That so many of the truths that we think that are just New Testament truths, the reality of them we see all the way through the Old Testament. I mean, stop and think about it. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. There in Hebrews 13:5 that we quote so often, talk about, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Even when the Israelites were in bondage, God didn't forsake them. God judged them. He was working in their lives. I mean, you think about it. You go back to the book of Daniel, and there when all of the wise men and the magicians are going to be murdered because they couldn't interpret the king's dream that he had forgotten. How'd you like to have a fellow call you in and say, I had a dream and I want you to tell me what it means? You say, okay, tell me the dream. He said, I don't know it, I forgot it. I mean, when you stop and think about it, God didn't forsake Daniel when he needed that. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, when... Let me ask y'all something. Nothing on this subject, okay? Let me ask, I just thought about it. Say the name Abednego. Somebody say how you say it. Well, say it where I can hear it, though. Abednego. Have you looked at the spelling? A-B-E-D. Abednego. Abednego. And up until about 5 years ago, I called him Abednego. And he didn't even, he in heaven didn't even know who I was talking about. But anyway, when they were thrown into the furnace, God didn't forsake them. He came down and went with them in the fire. I love what years ago Brother Olaf said, in the Bible is where we have the first mention of central air conditioning. It was in the fiery furnace. God just cooled the fire off while they were on the inside. So what I'm saying is, God never forsakes His people. He'll judge us, but He never forsakes us. Now, the sins that we're going to read about here in the book of Malachi, the same sins, and you ought to write this down, are found in Nehemiah chapter 13. It's amazing when you really stop and think about it, sin never changes. It gets worse. But the sins that we're having to face in this generation we're living in, they've had them back in the Bible days. They had them in the New Testament days. Well, two of the worst despot groups of people were the Greeks and the Romans. Sexual immorality like you could never imagine. Malachi is used by God to point out the terrible sins of the people, but also of the priest. And let me just say this. I believe if the preachers would be right, we wouldn't have near the problems that we're having in America today. With some of the preachers, pastors that were there that serve on the board too, we got to talking about that. And it was sort of the conclusion that preachers are afraid to preach. It's not that they maybe don't believe it, but they've got it so good in their church that they're, what's that old saying? Don't make waves. Man, it's time for us to have storms. Well, that's what I'm talking about. They've got it so good in their churches. And boy, if I preach on that, well, somebody in the church, well, more than likely God wouldn't have you preach on it if Somebody in the church didn't need it. I'd be like me, I'm going to preach 30 minutes tonight on there are no elephants in this building. Well, nobody needs that, but nobody would be offended. But when you talk about covetousness, you talk about faithfulness, being true to God. Now that hits all of us. We talked about verses 1 to 5 last time, that they doubted God's love. And before we're really too critical, if we're not careful, we can have thoughts like that. Boy, if God really loved me, why would this happen? Why would this be in my life? Why would I have this difficulty? Why would I have this sickness? Why would I have this injury? Why would I? And boy, we just why all the time. And the amazing thing is, when you why all the time, you'll begin to whine all the time. And let me be up front with you. That's one thing that I cannot stand, is whining. I never allowed that with my two children. You talk to me and ask me directly. You don't sit there, no, don't do that. Because whatever you're asking for, you're not getting it if you're whining all the time. Boy, people walk around church so often. Not us, I'm talking about other churches. Got that poochy mouth disease, just why did God do this? Have you ever wondered what would happen if God took His hand off of you? If God dropped that hedge that He has around every one of us, we wouldn't last till midnight. The devil would be on our doorstep and do everything he can to kill us. But now let's look at verse 6. And here they despise His name. Notice in verse 6, a son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is mine honor? Is God a father? See, the amazing thing is, the society that we live in today, that wouldn't be much to them because they don't honor their father. They don't have a respect for their parents. They don't have a respect for elders, for their older people. They don't have a respect for government. Boy, I found this to be true over the years in youth work. If teenagers don't fear their parents, they have trouble fearing God. Why? They see their parents and they're not doing anything. They can't see God. And they can develop the attitude that we read about in the Bible. God doesn't see it. God's not concerned. I'm just one person living among all these billions of people, and God's not concerned about my life, which is so much of a lie. I used this story, several years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. When I was at the Bill Rice Ranch, I remember we had 2 boys that had to be disciplined, and the pastor came with them to Dr. Rice's office, and Dr. Bill talked to them and had gotten permission from their parents to spank them. And, of course, the ranch doesn't do that anymore. It would be good for the kids. It's not good for the ranch, legally. But so the pastor was there, and the pastor said, Dr. Rice, could I say something before you discipline the boys? He said, sure, Pastor. Boy, his voice changed. He got almost crying, and he said, when y'all broke those rules, he said, God had tears in His eyes. I looked at Dr. Wright, and he went, what? Thinking, what are you talking about? And he went on and on for about 2 or 3 minutes, and finally he got finished. And Dr. Rice said, well, I'll be honest with you, boys. He said, I'm not for sure about God having a tear in His eyes, but y'all are about to. They could see Dr. Rice. It didn't bother them that God had a tear in His eye, which I don't think he did. But anyway, but if they don't have a fear, and by the way, if they don't fear their parents, they will not fear God. They won't fear their teachers. They won't fear the police. And it all comes right back down to the home and the family. And that comes right back to the church. We've got to take a stand and stay there. Now, so he says, where is mine honor? If I be a master. Oh, is he the ruler? Is he the boss? Is he the master? Absolutely. Where is my fear, saith the Lord of hosts unto you? O priests that despise my name. And you say, wherein have we despised thy name? Boy, they questioning God. I mean, you're saying this, prove it. Watch it. Verse 7. Ye offer polluted bread upon mine altar. See, they would get ready to come in to put the bread on the altar there, the table of showbread. And they'd look and they'd say, ooh, that's a bad piece. It's got green fungus on it. Let's take it in there and put that in there. We'll keep the best for supper tonight after we worship. See what they're doing? They're giving God the leftovers. They're giving God the least that they can. He said, you offer polluted bread upon my altar, and ye say, wherein have we polluted thee? In that ye say the table of the Lord is contemptible. Now what's this? And if you offer the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? You go out there and you get a lamb, you get an ox, you're going to offer that, you get a goat, you're going to offer that, and you bring me one that's blind, one that's crippled, one that's full of blemishes. And if you offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Now listen to it. Offer it now unto thy governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person, saith the Lord of hosts? Let me ask you this. Don't answer out loud. If I were invited to your house for dinner, and you had bread in there that had the green mold on it, and you just took a knife and scraped it off, got it all off. And if you do that, please get it all off before you give it to me. But, and I'm a nobody compared to God. But how often do we give God the leftovers? One of our families was in a church not too long ago. And they told me, they said, we had trouble paying attention because people were going in and out of the auditorium while the preacher was preaching, getting donuts and sweet rolls and hot chocolate and coffee and hot tea, just going in and out. Teenagers, children, adults, just come. He said, man, I thought I'd gone to a breakfast. Now, please, don't misunderstand me. I am not telling you Sunday school teachers don't have food in your Sunday school class. I am not saying that because I go by and get some. So I'm not saying that. But as I mentioned a few days ago, there's nothing holy about this room right here. But there is something special about it. This is where you and I, as Parkview Baptist Church, have set aside to worship our God. Now, I'm going to say something that may offend you. And if you do, take a half a baby aspirin and get over it, all right? So oftentimes in churches, we give better dress to our job than we do to our God. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? Somebody asked me the other day, and they were just interested, and they weren't being critical at all. But they asked me, they said, preacher said, why do you always wear a coat and tie when you preach? It's the best I've got. It's the best I have. Well, preacher, do you think that I ought to wear a coat and tie to church? No, ladies, I don't think y'all need to do that at all. I was in a meeting some time ago, and the discussion came up about facial hair. And they said, Brother Collier, what do you think? I said, I don't think any lady ought to have a beard. I think that'd just not be good for a lady to have a beard. And one of the guys had been a missionary overseas. He said, you know, overseas, that might happen sometime, you know. I didn't mean that. But anyway, no, I just want to give God my best. Do I have a conviction about it? No. But I'll get one. You know, it's probably pretty close to it. Now, when I speak at a camp and it's hot and it's in a place with no air conditioning, sometimes I won't wear a coat, I won't wear a tie. But that's a standard for that place. But let me tell you something. I have watched this for years. As the leader of the church, if I stopped wearing a tie and a coat, y'all would do worse than what you're doing now. That is human nature. That's human nature. So, if you know, and I tell our staff, if you want our folks to be on this level, then you and I have got to be up here to give them something to shoot at. I wish, and I'm serious about this, I wish God wouldn't make me do that. Because my dry cleaning bill is about $150 a month. And I wouldn't have to spend near that much money if I didn't wear a coat and tie and slacks all the time. I got tickled the other day. Brother Joey said, preacher said, you know, you wear black slacks a lot. I said, yeah, I do. He said, don't you get tired of wearing the same slacks all the time? I said, Joey, I have about 10 pair of black slacks. I don't wear the same pair every day. So I'm going to have them sew a number. This is pair number 1, that's pair number 2, pair number 3, so people can see that. But what I'm trying to get across is we ought never get to a place to where we don't want to be our best for God. That it doesn't matter to us not to be our best for God. Now, notice in verse 9 very quickly. He said, and now I pray you, beseech God that He will be gracious unto you. This hath been by your means. Will He regard your person, saith the Lord of hosts? Who is there among you that would shut the doors for naught? Neither do you kindle fire on mine altar for naught. You're going to do something. You're going to be doing. I have no pleasure in you, saith the Lord of hosts. Neither will I accept an offering at your hand. Sometimes we live in such a way that God won't even accept our worship. You say, preacher, that's in the Old Testament. The principle's all the way through the Scripture. He is God and He changes not. Give Him our best. We're going to have to stop there because I only have 2 minutes and I don't have time to get into verse 11. We'll start there next time. God bless you.